Good day or good morning, everyone. So we're carrying on with the mentor stream of lightning talks, tutorials, and very exciting discussions. So this morning we've got Sam Bolling from Riverside Research, and he's going to give us a lightning talk on a case study and vibe coding with OGC API connected systems for OGC API connected systems. So without further delay, over to you, Sam.
Hi, greetings, everyone. As Gobe mentioned, I'm Sam Bolling with Riverside Research, and recently I've gotten to do a project involving one of my favorite things to do, vibe coding, and I'm happy to be here and brief with all of you at one of my favorite things the OGC does, code sprints. Right, so I'll run through things at a moderate pace because I think we're running behind. I'll try and make this a little condensed, but I'll go over a common definition for us for vibe coding, what people are saying about vibe coding, what made it possible, because I don't believe it was possible to do maybe as recently as 2025. Like, I don't think that it was as possible, or the conditions, at least for me, to do it. Um, and then I'll go into why it seemed like a good idea to try, because it's just something you don't wake up, or at least I wouldn't say, hey, I want to give this a try. And then the interface that I've got set up, I'll go through a process, and then I'll just give you kind of a status update, or what, and go through some questions. So hopefully it goes pretty well. And maybe if you're either skeptical about vibe coding, or if you are unfamiliar with it, this brief will kind of be that targeted sweet spot, and it'll give you 30 minutes or less of information that you'll benefit from. Okay, so we'll start off with a common definition. I've got, quite literally a definition on here that you can take a look at. It's when you are using natural language as opposed to a programming language. With a syntax, you're just using whichever language that your interface will understand, whether it be English or French or some other language. You just type directly into a chat console, and artificial intelligence then tries to interpret what you have asked it to do, and it will do the coding for you in a programming language. And then, spoiler alert, you look at the bottom of this, the definitions were generated by artificial intelligence. So if there are questions about what vibe coding is at the end of this, then we can go into those questions. Okay, so besides just defining it, the idea of like, okay, it sounds like we all understand vibe coding is using artificial intelligence like ChatGPT or Claude or Grok um, or Codex to do the coding for you. And everyone has varying opinions about it, and levels of understanding of how it works. Um, and so I've gathered some of my favorite comments that have kind of appeared in my For You stream on Twitter. Now, I've also got a LinkedIn page. That one's not as interesting because it's more professional. I like this particular platform for this topic because you're getting a bit more raw emotional response commentary from folks in the different domain of software development. And although this looks a little bit like a chaotic retrospective where people just put stickies wherever, I did organize it into what I'm seeing as two emerging schools of thought. So on the left-hand side, you see a bit more of a skeptical mindset. Um, and it's starting to shake out that maybe using AI is not bad, but the only individuals who should use AI are computer science degree, or boot camp certificate holding, um, have coding experience software developers. Now, on the extreme, on the other side of it, you have those who are just diving in with no software development experience whatsoever. They view that this gate has been opened, this barrier to create software has gone away. Um, so you'll see that. Let's see. From my perspective, if you look at any of these comments, if any of them resonate with you, after kind of going through this case study, I can tell you that I believe every comment here resonates with me. I've had a facet of everything that someone has put on put in one of these comments, to the technical debt caution at the bottom left, to the gap between what you can use AI to create relatively quickly, and is that, like, after you kind of look at it more closely, is it anywhere near something that you would ship into production? Um, you've got some fear that program managers or managers of sorts are going to start coding again up at the top. Um, and then on the far right, I think my favorite one that makes me laugh a little bit, if AI goes down on the bottom right there, if AI goes down, well, then you got to remember how to code again. And that particular group admits, well, I guess we're off for the day because we never knew how to code to begin with. Um, so you've got a wide variety. One thing that resonated with me a little bit, and this is because um, I'm in an environment with very senior software engineers that I come into work with, and I don't have that skill set. Um, and when I started this project, I said, "Hey guys, take a look at this thing that I feel is pretty cool. I'd like to share with you." They wouldn't look at it. I think subconsciously they were insulted that somebody without any training or education in the fundamentals of software development would use something like this to create software and call it what they call their work. Very proud of the craftsmanship of software development. So I learned that. And that was my first introduction to the opinion about what I was going to do. But then I saw some of these comments that made me feel better, and I realized um, someone over here in the middle right says the vast majority of software that's just out there in the internet isn't top tier grade. So if somebody like me is putting something out there, and I put a reasonable amount of effort and rigor in the work I do with AI, I can maybe get somewhere above the pure slop. Now, this next slide is a third school of thought. And this is the one that if I were to advocate for, um, this is it. I believe this group is a little bit more objective than the other two groups that seem to begin an argument. This group is seeing the trend. If you look on the left, you can see the not necessarily representation of every individual that's in the domain of coding, but the environment around us, the environmental factors around us that are changing. And the recognizing the trends, the things that are possible, and the capabilities that are emerging, and they're recommending to use it and use it often, to learn, to exploit the new emerging capabilities in real time. And then the last thing before I leave the what are people talking about? What are the different schools of thought? I like this one here in the top right that happened to have dark mode on at the time. It indicates that there's so many other tools in addition to the coding, that the coding came in, or I'm sorry, the AI, that the AI coding, the vibe coding came in after these other tools started to lay the foundation that if you can be successful with AI assisted coding or vibe coding, well, then everything else seems to be in place for you to be somewhat self-sufficient to achieve or accomplish some goals. And that's kind of the result of my case study here. Okay, so into the case study. I used AI to make that picture, and the idea was mine. To me, I look at what made this project even possible, something to consider, something to pursue, something to try, fail a couple times, and eventually succeed, was the intersection of open standards, the reliable AI, and I'll get to that in a second, open source software, and the medium it's on, such as GitHub, and very powerful tools and resources. And most of them are free, if not all of them are free. So if you imagine this as an intersection with four different streets feeding into it, um, that point conceptually is where the magic happens. What enables somebody um, to accomplish something with vibe coding. And I say that because I think without those other ingredients, the vibe coding wouldn't be a trend right now. And honestly, I think that's something to be proud of from an open standards development organization to contribute so um, meaningfully into the results of what people can do with this new emerging capability. Now, just to go over this, all the links work. I sent the presentation over to GoBay. I hope that there's a way that if anybody needs it or anybody wants it after the fact, they can go, because there's a lot of links and these handful of slides. But just a quick, before I move off the slide, you can see that the open standard that was available for me to use and do this experiment with, the API Connected System Standard from OGC. The two different AI products I used were GitHub Copilot, mostly Claude Sonnet 4.6. Anything before that would make you want to pull your hair out. It made you feel like you had done a good job, but if you can't review the code, then you don't know if you did a good job. And it did not do a good job. But Claude Sonnet kind of changed that. And there was a few other things that I learned along the way that helped kind of mitigate not doing a good job. And then also using Codex, that came in a little bit later because the earlier models of Codex were not very reliable either. And then these are when I say open source software played a major factor in this, these are as much a credits to the work of real software engineers that had done work involving TypeScript library, an implementation of the server, a handful of other different resources that without these, it's like standing on the shoulder of giants coming in and being able to leverage the software that they've put out on GitHub for free. And then lastly, GitHub itself is a platform to build the code using VS Code, which is also free. I learned in the process that Oracle and Cloudflare have free accounts with services, and last but not least, a domain name naming server service that gets you a free URL if you don't want to pay for one. Okay, the motivation for this. Well, we published the standards, the SWIG published the standards in July of 2025, and the OGC was hosting a code sprint in October. And we got the idea, can we engage, can we build some form of a relationship with the open source community to implement and advance or progress the implementation goals and adoption goals for the standards? And the answer at the time was somewhat. We certainly had the potential. There were a lot of projects on open source that could be worked on in a lens to advance some of the SWIG goals. Multiple server implementations, multiple client implementations, different types of tools relating to using the standard or implementing the standard. One such was the camp-to-camp OGC client TypeScript library. We engaged the maintainer. They welcomed the opportunity for a contribution, and you can see this quad chart. That's the motivation. We needed to develop a resource, and around that time, if you were looking at your social media, different advertisements from ChatGPT and others were saying, well, we can do the coding for you. And people were starting to talk about this thing called vibe coding. Before I leave that page, I can tell you that it failed in October, it failed in November, it failed in January. It was finally successful around February, March timeframe. There was about 4 or 5 throwaway repositories that were exploratory and educational in nature. So October 2025, when the advertisements were coming in, was not the time. Not at least not for a non-coder. Okay, I hope that you can see this. For those who have done some AI assisted coding or vibe coding using VS Code in one of the chat windows, they used to all be extensions, but now the GitHub one, the GitHub chat is built right into VS Code, and there's an extension for codecs. And my setup here is a little bit more interesting, I think, than what you'll typically see. You'll usually see somebody with one chat window open over here, but not the other, or maybe the codecs chat window open, but not the Copilot. But if you're crazy like me and you love being crazy, then you will set it up with two, and you can see these are both going at the same time. You get to the point where you can manage having both AI working at the same time. So you got Codex working on a problem, and you've got Claude Sonnet working on a problem at the same time in the VS Code thing. And then also, so if you've done vibe coding before, you'll know that these are exciting buttons down here, because if you don't have these settings, full access and bypass approvals, then it keeps asking you, are you sure you want to let me do this? And after a few weeks of that, you get tired of it, or I did, and I just say, you know what? You only live once. That's what this stands for. And I gave them some access so they quit asking. I put the list of extensions I have here. So currently in VS Code, you have to go into its extension marketplace and get the official Codex extension. There's a GitHub Actions extension that helps. This one's a big one. It's the official GitHub MCP server. To be honest with you, I don't know exactly how it works, but it enabled both of these guys to really interact with my GitHub account and just make any nature of change. They could submit comments, update comments, commit code, do whatever a normal GitHub user would do, as they advertised, by the way. They weren't really able to do it until this GitHub MCP server came around, and that seemed to solve those issues that they had behind the hood. Now, that uses a free service from GitLens. So I got GitLens in here. I didn't know that. It was a little quirk, but put it on here just so you'd be aware of it. You use the MCP server. It's run by GitLens as a service. They do offer it for free, but then you got to make an account so it quits trying to authenticate with nothing to authenticate with. Okay, so I think I did these a little out of order, but I did it on purpose. I wanted, in reality, I didn't set any DevOps stuff up until I was well past failing several times and then on my way to succeeding. In my mind, I thought I was going to get the project to some level of like done and then test it. What I should have done is pursued a testing environment first and then tested every step of the way. But just so you know, these were the things I did to set up that Oracle account, um, and to set up the Cloudflare account, and then lastly that DNS server account. I put it here this way. I know it's a wall of words. This one's more of a leave behind slide, but you'll notice some patterns here. Have a conversation with ChatGPT, not Codex. This is the go to chatgpt.com or .app, I think it is, and you say, hey, I want to host a web server, and it will tell you. It'll say, oh, these are the different options available to you. Oh, Oracle has a free account. How do I do that? How do I set it up? And the next thing you know, I'm a DevOps engineer. I'm just kidding. I'm not, but I was able to get everything up and running by following the steps. And every time I ran into an issue and something wasn't working right, I would just take a screenshot, give it to AI, and say, try this until it was working. And that was the case for all of these. Okay, this would be, I put this in a particular way because if you're thinking about doing it or you're trying to figure out like, well, what does he do to kind of actually get something done? For me, you'll notice at the top of the title, I call this Extreme Waterfall for Vibe Coding. The waterfall part of it is this. Since I can't review the code and tell you if it's good or not, and I'm relying on it to be functional at the outset of this or at the end of this. I need to have the whole plan done at the beginning, and I have to have confidence in the plan. So there's a whole host of research and planning that has to go in before any coding is done. So it kind of goes back into waterfall, but not the way that you would think. It's pretty swift. It's more on the extreme end of things. You could get it all done in a day. But these are the steps I took. I forked the upstream. I made a local copy, and I hope you notice another pattern here. AI did all this for me. It even recommended most of it. I would just ask it what to do next, and it would say, this is what I would recommend you do. And it navigated me through the steps, and I was just kind of consulting it, I suppose. And so, forked, cloned, set up a doc folder. This is not something. This was a lessons learned. I think of it like if you're gonna do rock climbing and you've got to set in these points. I don't even know what they're called because I don't do rock climbing, but I've watched TV and they put these points in along the way. So if they lose their grip, they don't fall all the way down. They fall to hopefully their last point. That's what you have to do, or I have to do with AI. I have to set in all these points through documentation and incorporate that into the prompts so that it uses that information so it doesn't forget and start to hallucinate or drift. All these links work and they go directly to the different references that they are. So if you want to see examples of those, I don't think we'll have time now because of our scheduling, but if you get a hold of this, you can just leaf through and go straight through. I think the best resources from that perspective, if you're interested in any of this, would be these three key documents here. And I work with AI to put these together in this order. And so if you get a chance to look at these, you'll see how that makes sense. One is, what are we trying to do? The goal and the definition statement. Come up with one of those. It's really good. And then you can work with AI and the research that you've done to build an implementation guide, which is everything that has to be done to achieve your goal. And then a separate document is the roadmap, the list of ordered tasks to complete that goal. You get those things done well, and then don't forget to do 8, which is then go through your roadmap and split them up into things that it can do in one prompt at a time. Turn those into GitHub issues, and you're on to something. And the rest is pretty much the things you would expect. You just implement the GitHub issues, work them one at a time, do a copious amount of live tests and code reviews. I've got examples of those in my governance as well. And then I'm sure there's a better, more efficient way to rebase your work, something to do with branches. I haven't figured out yet, but I actually have I just create a separate fork, and then I work with AI to just port all the work that's been done into a series of commits, and it can usually do that in one prompt. Okay, I think we're close to the end here. It's like my last or second to last slide. How are things going? I thought this was kind of entertaining to look at. Apparently, GitHub kind of tracks how active you've been with doing things. This is from my account. And just know, before this time frame, like this green dot here was like October 6th, I think. That was in preparation for doing the code sprint last year. So just know all this like vacancy, this void, it goes on forever. The 711 contributions that are tracked by GitHub are all indicative of this vibe coding effort. And now, while I went through the steps for a very specific thing that has been like the crown jewel of the vibe coding activities I've been doing, it's expanded. I now have 3 live running API connected system servers and 1 live connected systems client, and they're running 24/7. I've got data publishers publishing live data into them. It's always on, and so it's end to end. It's got the data publishers pushing into the server, and it's got the client that can connect to it at any given time. 3 servers connect to any of them at any given time, and demonstrate that workflow. And then now has 5 kind of product directions. One being the library that I take a lot of care with making sure it's pretty tight. The rest are a little bit more on the AI sloppy side. They're a little bit faster. As long as this one's done super well, then the other ones build on top of it. But we've got these products. This one's brand new. The website, that would be the bonus case study, but we don't have time for it. Just know that the setup that I just shared with you all, if you've got a template, if you go to GitHub and find somebody's like HTML page, their GitHub for putting together a website, you can have AI go and fork that, and then you just speak into existence. We'll type. You could speak. There are some there. You can just do voice to text, but I didn't. You type into existence, like I want this here, I want that there, or whatever, and it all does it pretty magically. I was going to show you one of those websites. The reason I think that's important is because that is significantly easier for it to accomplish. That is light work for it to do. You can build professional grade websites with the open source work that others have made available in AI in minutes to hours, once you've got it set up and have played around with it a little bit. And we've got a pretty thriving developing open source community of practitioners. So that's kind of how it's going. Oh, and I guess the top bullet here, tentatively approved. They've already reviewed the code in a way that they plan to release the upstream with a 2.0 version to include the code contribution. So that's a big success and a win there. Okay, I'll go to my questions and the comments that didn't necessarily fit into any of those schools of thought, but more on the comical side that I wanted to share with you because I thought they were funny. So do I have any questions?
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for an excellent briefing there. Are there any questions for Sam or comments? So I've just got a comment, Sam. So yesterday, so as part of this code sprint, one of the activities is to prototype a JSON encoding of the geoscience markup language. Yesterday we were given the initial draft JSON schema files, and we thought, okay, we needed to generate or to create example JSON documents that conform to that JSON schema file or series of JSON schema files. And we were quite impressed. So we ran the JSON schema files through Claude, and Claude was able to generate the JSON documents based on the objects that are defined in that schema file. And there were just some really minor errors, but errors that were pretty much identified and fixed within a few seconds. But we also tried another platform, which shall remain nameless. But we also tried another platform, which didn't actually produce anything that could be used. So I suppose my comment there is to say, as you've explored Claude, and I think you explored another one as well. How are you finding? I mean, are you trying multiple platforms in order to see, which one works best for what functions, and if so, what impression are you getting in terms of which platforms work best for which aspects of your work there?
So when it comes to the vibe coding, I can tell you that anything before Claude Sonnet 4.6, any of its earlier models or anything lighter weight than that, wasn't reliable. It was just it would make you think that it was doing a good job, but if you didn't know it wasn't, then you're just going to be happy with bad results, and you won't be any wiser. And that was me for like 4 months until Claude Sonnet 4.6 came out. I was really happy with the Claude Opus 4.7 model that recently came out, until Microsoft GitHub Copilot changed the price on it, and they didn't tell me, and I ran out of tokens or whatnot because they changed it from like 7 times their normal rate to 15. So you got to be careful with those things. So I was like, well, 4.6 worked out pretty well. I am seeing that Codex 5.4 model and all these little model different usually make a big deal from one model to the next. So that's why I'm mentioning those. So I would say I'm limited in my ability to try too many of them, because they all cost some money. But those are the ones I found successful. And you saw my setup where I've got codecs on one side of the same screen and Claude on the other side. I usually have them working in tandem on the same problem. I'll have Claude do the work first, and I'll have Codex review it, and then I'll have Claude work on the next thing while Codex is reviewing it. And I find that their orientation works out that way. Claude just seems to be better at kind of doing the work, and Codex seems to be better at reviewing the work.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thanks for that. I think that sounds like a good strategy to get one to do the work and then the other one to review it and you know and vice versa. So I think that's a good strategy. Are there any other questions or comments for Sam? Okay, cool. Sam, thanks so much for an excellent presentation there, and apologies once again for the delayed start. I think everyone, let's thank Sam for an excellent presentation, please. Okay, so we have 5 minutes, I think, before the next one. So we'll just take a short break and resume in 5 minutes. So feel free to stay on this Microsoft Teams channel.